Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, March the 19th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria. I'd like to thank our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, so we'll start off. I was just in Vancouver for a couple of days, and when I got back yesterday, I picked up a copy of The Province at a restaurant, and it's talking about something that was a big story in Vancouver. And it says, "Are you safe? Are you safe on the bus?" That's what the headline says. And what happened was there was a pretty vicious assault on a female bus driver in Vancouver. Some people were drinking in the back of the bus. I guess it's her job to go and ask them to get off, and she was attacked by them. So the Vancouver province asked the question, are you safe on the bus? And no, I think in many ways you're not safe on the bus, although for the most part things go along pretty smoothly. But the people who attacked the bus driver have a record of more than, I think, 100 issues with the police over the last few years. It was a couple of women who attacked her, drinking on the bus, and they've had over 100 altercations with the police. And I heard the head of the bus drivers union on the radio. He was saying, that civil society is starting to break down. The bus drivers see it because, they're out there very, very much in public, and they've got a job to do, which is to collect a fare, and, people are on the bus. They're, it's like a public place where a lot of things go on. So these people have had 100 run-ins with the police of some kind, probably never been charged, or almost never. There are people who have been banned from the buses in Vancouver. Legally, they can't get on a bus, but the police and the BC Transit, or whoever owns the buses in Vancouver, will not give their pictures to the bus drivers, so the bus drivers can see who's banned and who isn't. That's what they call a privacy issue. So, but on another page, in the same paper here, there's a story about a guy who got 12 years in jail for robbing the same bank 3 times. As far as I know, nobody was hurt. 12 years in jail for robbing a bank 3 times. Now, why does that happen, where you get 12 years in jail for robbing a bank? Because the banks run the country and they make the laws, and they want to make sure that nobody's robbing their banks.
Yeah.
But people can be assaulted, murdered, beaten, anything. You don't get 12 years. So what we see is a legal system in Canada that, in my opinion, is less and less caring about people or protecting people. And I think they're trying to destroy our society. When I say they, I mean the corporations who run the country. I think they're deliberately trying to destroy our society, and they're doing it. And this kind of headline, are you safe on the bus? Well, are they trying to instill fear?
Well, yeah, you're trying to contextualize the story. Maybe they should have written the story that way. But what happens often, the media jumps in the middle of a story. These people did have mental health issues, and where's the support now for people that don't have money, that have mental health issues? They're on the streets, and they get on the buses. They interact in many ways. There's no support for them anymore. It started back, I remember even under the NDP regime, Harcourt, they started letting a lot more people out of sanatoriums and stuff, and they had this more of an integration into society plan or something. It was a big cost-saving measure, what it was. And
yeah, there was supposed to be a plan, but there was no plan. The only plan was to close the hospitals and put people on the street.
Yeah, and then we have to deal with it there. But there's one issue there. The other one, as far as I'm concerned, is the interest of wanting to put you in an automobile as opposed to taking public transit. When I read a story like that, I'm going, wow. When I'm in Vancouver, I have to take a bus, and I can take a cab easily. I'll often take a cab because I feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure how the system works, and I'm not sure who I'm going to encounter. That's good for cabs, and it's good for the automobile industry. I always think there's a pressure that way, And yeah, the other issue, of course, is just a general sort of disarray of society, as on a daily basis these confrontations occur over and over again, and the trust level goes down, and it's not good.
You know, I think it's the same group of people who creates the homelessness and the poverty. You know, the people at the top,
Yeah.
they deliberately create homelessness in Canada. They deliberately create poverty. They deliberately create a massive income gap, and they know, because it's all well known. You know, in the world of academics or people who follow this stuff, when there is a big gap between rich and poor, you get more crime, you get more trouble, you get more problems, you get more people having problems. I agree with you. It's like they're trying to destabilize our society,
Yeah.
and with some success. You know, and bottom line, I think they don't necessarily want to have a society in Canada anymore, because we just get in their way.
Well, it depends what your definition is of society, but if you want to have a cohesive, caring society that's fundamentally fair, and which I believe most people want, doesn't matter what you call yourself politically or any other grouping you may want to be in, fundamentally we all, and this is worldwide, we all have the same needs and cares and desires. I think people are fundamentally good, and we all want harmony. There's a few people that don't. Seems that they are running the show right now. You talk about mental health issues. If you look at some of these people that make decisions that have such gravity and are so detrimental to our society, you really have to wonder about what's going on in their heads.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway.
You wanted to talk about.
Well, there's a couple of things I mentioned the other week about. I thought that we should have the right to vote in Canada. That should be enshrined. And I did look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and there it is, right at the top in Section 3, that all Canadians have the right to vote. And I think it's so important right now, particularly with what the Harper regime is doing with this, what they're calling the Fair Elections Act, that pretty well everybody else is calling the Unfair Elections Act, at basically making it harder and harder for people to vote. A very good YouTube, if you Google Elizabeth May speaks about Unfair Elections Act, you'll see her speaking in the House of Commons. A great little speech she made about what's really happening on the ground. And there's not really any problem with electoral fraud in the sense of people using fake IDs or doing things like that. It doesn't even hit the radar as a problem. But there's a couple of 100,000 people will be directly impacted by this act that Harper wants to impose, and it's mostly the homeless, the poor, the elderly, immigrants into Canada that are not sure of the process. Pretty well any group that can be marginalized.
Yeah, and there's more to it than that, because what I understand is it also, this new Elections Act that Harper is putting in place, it makes it more difficult to investigate electoral fraud,
Yeah.
such as that was, a lot of people think, was carried out by the Conservative Party in the last federal election. I mean, there is no question that there was a deliberate attempt to subvert the last federal election, and they may have successfully subverted it. Now, the problem is, since then, the media has been completely quiet about the whole issue. Is there any investigation? Is anything happening? Do we know? And now Harper comes out with a law that makes it more difficult to investigate electoral fraud, and there's no coverage in the media. It's like it's not an issue. And what the media is covering instead is the missing airplane.
Right.
And they're doing that from a strange, interesting point of view too.
Yeah, I think we have to watch. I mean, I've been, always preoccupied with the elections and fairness and polling and for years, and have seen such huge flaws in the process and how they've been able to sway the voters, particularly in the last election, Jack. We'll have a nice chat about that, in the future. But the key ingredients that went into, I think, stealing the election away from the public.
You're talking
British
about
Columbia.
in British Columbia.
And
Okay.
we'll go over that sometime, in which the NDP and the Liberals collaborated very, very consistently throughout the campaign, and which allowed Christy Clark to get elected, which is just almost so astonishing. It's unbelievable. But we have to, I think all Canadians should be really concerned about the fairness in elections and really cut across all party lines. Everybody wants fairness, and we just can't allow the electoral officer to lose autonomy. They have to have more autonomy. They have to have more ability to challenge whatever party, including the government, for doing things wrong, and not be fearful that they're not meeting some guidelines that the government's setting out right now. Because, when the governments impose laws like this, the definition of tyranny is when a government can override the norms of civil society. When a government can just make a law that changes something that fundamentally makes elections unfair. And this is what the Harper government's trying to do. So if we don't have an electoral officer or any other entity to push back, and we don't really have the opposition in the parliament to make a big difference, we're suffering under tyranny here. And once you allow it, of course, it's a slippery slope.
And of course, we already have it. We do have tyranny in Canada. We certainly don't have democracy. Our democracy is completely gone. The Canadian people are, as we say on this show, the Canadian people are basically irrelevant now.
Yeah.
Do any of our governments give a damn about what we want? Take Christy Clark and her fracking. I mean, this is a crazed plan, corporate plan that is going to poison our land, poison our water, poison the people.
Yeah.
In order to, she says, create jobs. I don't think Christy Clark cares about jobs. It's corporate profits that this is all about. If we wanted jobs in Canada, we wouldn't be signing all these corporate free trade agreements that are allowing our jobs to be shipped overseas. We'd have programs in Canada and plans in Canada that would create employment in Canada. We'd use the Bank of Canada. This could be a great and wonderful country in which people were more prosperous, worked less, were not in debt, did not have crazy house prices, and had a better society. We can't have all of that, but not as long as the corporations run our country.
No, and the thing is, we need opposition. Who's speaking for not only the environment? I mean, you'd think the Green Party would be speaking for the environment, but not on fracking. They like fracking, apparently. We're going to have to see when the new leader is elected and see what direction they're taking the party. But, for an environmental party, you sort of count on them to dig their heels in and take very principled stands. There's no expediency going on. They're just simply saying, no, this is fundamentally and morally wrong. It's economically disastrous. We're not going for it in any way. But the Green Party's taking a very soft line.
You're talking about the Green Party of BC.
BC. Then you have the NDP, of course, and that's,
well, let's just talk about that. So the leadership race is on. I think it's $25,000 to join the fray. Imagine that. I mean, Tommy Douglas, I hope, would be spinning in his grave. $25,000 to enter the race. What does that mean about who can get in? A number of years ago, a friend of ours, Mehdi Najari, ran for the leadership of the NDP, and they tried to keep him out as well.
Yeah.
But his speech, as I very well remember, at the convention where Carol James was elected leader, Mehdi's speech, because he talked about the things people believed.
Yeah.
His speech got more standing ovations than anyone's speeches, including Carol James. But I'm sure he didn't get very many votes. But now it's impossible for anybody outside the elite. Who's got $25,000 to enter? I mean, it's ridiculous. This is the NDP. It should be against the law for a political party to restrict the access to the leadership like that.
Well, I no longer have any illusions. You probably don't either about what the NDP are going to be able to do in the near future with the group that are in control of the party right now, and there's no change of direction. There's a very top-down oriented organization. John Horgan now has thrown his hat back into the ring for the leadership. It's like criticizing Ronald Reagan's foreign policy. It's so easy, it's boring, and talking about the NDP is like,
Yeah.
it's so frustrating to see this happen.
But what we have to do as the citizens who live here is to create a set of rules that opens a political party up so that it can't be controlled by a small elite group at the top who take power and then use that power to maintain their control forever, because that's essentially what you get. I'm a member of the NDP. I'm never asked as a member, and I guess none of the other members are ever asked either, what do you want? What do you think? What would you like us to do? All they send us is requests for funds.
Yeah.
So if the leadership does not listen to the membership, and they certainly don't listen to the public, then who is running our political parties, and for whose benefit are they being run?
Yeah.
And do you see how dangerous this is?
Now, I'm relying on my memory, and I'll stand corrected, but I think in 2006, that's when Gordon Campbell allowed the referendum on proportional representation.
Okay.
Was that around 2006?
I'm not sure, but let's say.
And I remember the people who ran the no campaign for proportional representation. For the most part, that no campaign was being run out of the back rooms of the NDP's offices. And Carol James would not, at the time, who was the leader of the opposition, would not step forward and support the initiative. The thing is that 57% of the public wanted some type of proportional representation. And
we voted. 57% said yes, we want to change to a PR
so
system.
we won, didn't we?
won,
Except that they said the threshold has to be 60%. But what
is
always
ridiculous.
stuck for me, and I thought, if Carol James had stepped up and said, this is a good idea, I think she could have swayed 2.5% of the population of British Columbia to vote for it, and we would have had a totally different electoral system in British Columbia. And there you go. There for me was just it was a knife in my heart for that to happen, and I can't forgive her for it. I can't forgive the NDP for doing what they're doing. They're very happy to be the dictators as long as they're in power, and they're happy to sit back and watch the other party take this province apart to wait their turn. And that's pretty well what we're up against with them, and it's all unforgivable. I've trashed my NDP membership card if I ever had one, and I can't support the provincial NDP because of those sort of sins. And I think they have to really rejuvenate, bring some new people up in that party.
But change the system. If the system is not democratic, if we give dictatorial powers to the leadership group, they will be dictators, and they are. Let's move on to one big news story of this week, which is what's happening in the Ukraine and Crimea and Russia.
Well, I did a little bit of Googling, and looking around and trying to figure out where's Crimea anyway, and what's this look like. And Crimea historically has been a part of Russia, and it was given away in the 50s to the Ukraine on a whim almost by Brezhnev. And but ethnically they're Slavic, Russian-speaking, and as the referendum went this week, I think 90% of them wanted to be part of Russia again. No surprise. The other side of that was when I was looking at the oil and gas exploration, I got into business websites and looked at some of the businesses that are actually running oil and gas from Western Europe to back and forth to Russia, mostly coming from Russia. And they're saying it's business as usual. Don't get excited. No tanks are going on the ground anywhere. The West is not any. There's no incentive to go there and put any kind of battlefield scenario in place. And the Russians the same way. They wanted to take over Crimea. Maybe this was a good excuse that they helped drum up. But this business as usual. But it looks like to me it's one of those good news stories for everybody, because Putin looks great in his support base, and in the West, everybody looks great over here too for standing up against these tyrants. And I just think it's a little public relations game that they're playing with the people to distract us perhaps from other bigger issues.
Yeah, well, one thing I would say is that our media has certainly given us a very one-sided point of view, that Putin is doing everything wrong, and Harper and Obama are standing up for democracy, freedom, and
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I mean it's
John Kerry.
It is. You know, the media has lied to me for my entire life. I
Yeah.
don't believe them anymore. I really recommend that you just can't. You just can't trust or believe the media. I mean, we may be making mistakes on this program. We may be saying things that are factually incorrect, but at least we're not deliberately trying to mislead people into doing certain things. That's our media's job. That's
Yeah.
what they do. That's why they exist. It's a totally corporate media, and they can't be trusted. They just can't be trusted.
Yeah, it's very hard to find out information about this issue because there's so many slants. If you get a lot of bloggers that are pro-Russian, by the way, and you know, a lot of terms was thrown around about the Ukrainians that were, you know, neo-Nazis and stuff like that, and I'm not convinced that that is a huge contingent in Ukraine, that they're really running the this opposition to the Ukrainian government and stuff like that. They are playing a role, but because you have these two sides using rhetoric full time, it's hard to, you know, to get the truth out of it. But we do have to work at it, and I think the big pictures are: don't get pushed around by global media. Don't get all whipped up and thinking, oh, we're into another crisis there. I think we're in a crisis in many other places. And I think that our attention is being diverted away from the other bigger issues while these sort of little political plays happen around the world. And I just think we just have to keep it in perspective. I'm not absolutely sure, but my call is that we're just seeing something play out over the next few months. It was kind of an interesting distraction.
Thank you very much, Walter. And
Always a pleasure, my man.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 2 of Citizens Forum. It's being filmed on Wednesday, March the 19th. There's a concert in the arena later tonight, and you may be hearing some music in the background or the foreground as they practice. We'll hope for the best, and this may or may not be able to be finished. Our guest in this segment is Dale Perkins. Dale is a community activist. We're going to be talking about a subject that I think is very important, which is citizens' assemblies. And maybe you can just start off by, or you have something different in mind, a constituent assembly, but it's basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can just give us a picture of what it is.
I think it's important for people to have opportunity to speak with, relate to, give opinion to the person who represents them. And since we have constituencies in the province, each constituency selects one person to represent them in the legislature. In the South Vancouver Island area, we have 6 of them, 6 MLAs. Each MLA then has responsibility to represent somebody. If they represent their leader, then that's a concern, and the party that they belong to. They could represent the wishes of lobbyists, or they could represent and make a special effort to represent the people that elect them. So my interest is to find a way to improve and make more viable our kind of democracy, which is supposed to be a representative democracy. These MLAs are all selected by you and I, people living in certain areas, defined areas called constituencies. And they have to pay attention to those folks more than they currently do, other than just at time of election. So what I'm proposing is that there be a meeting held at which people from each constituency can meet at a common place, at one place, one venue. And we can find out what is going on in terms of the legislature, in terms of bills and issues that are being considered. And those can be presented to the people that gather, and they can express opinion about that. And then later on in the meeting, considerably at the end of the meeting, there would be a face-to-face encounter meeting with their MLA either in person or by telephone or Skype or some form of way of connecting with them, so that they could, each MLA could hear what their own constituencies, what they think about a particular bill, be it about health, be it about education, be it about pipelines, be it about environmental issues. Whatever that is, those bills that are coming before the House and that they have to make a decision about in terms of how they represent the feelings of their constituents. They have to make a determination of what they're going to say, how they're going to vote. And that can be a very lively opportunity then for the people to have that input, direct input to the people that are representing them in the House, in the legislature. So that was my thinking, is to organize these gatherings.
Sounds a little bit like democracy.
It is, well, if we still hold to the notion of representative democracy. We don't have direct democracy, but we have this structure, this system called representative democracy. Each of those MLAs have to come from some place. They represent a particular area, a particular body of constituents. But do they pay any attention to what those constituents think and what they feel are important issues? What I'm proposing is a means by which those constituents can frame opinion and express will in regard to particular things that are coming before the House. It's not theoretical, it's not abstract, it's very direct. What's coming, I say, what's coming down the chute, as it were, to the legislature, what they will have to make a decision about. And are they going to get any input at all from constituents, apart from occasional phone call or a letter or a meeting on the street perhaps, or a delegation coming up? But is there a chance for some engagement, real engagement?
Well, you know, it's true that we citizens are almost completely excluded from the entire process. I think you've put your finger right on it.
Yeah.
The people we elect do not represent us. We're probably the last thing that they represent.
Yeah.
The party structure is such that the party leader tells everyone what to do and everyone does it.
Yeah.
Within those who follow these issues, our MLAs and MPs are often called trained SEALs,
Yeah.
because that's all they do, with a ball on their nose, and they clap their flippers when they're supposed to. And I think when I first heard your idea, I thought it was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's assemble a group of constituents within at least one constituency
Yeah.
and see what the people who actually live there think about the bills that are going through the legislature. Now, I think the legislature is sitting right now, although I'm not even sure. We're all so far removed from it. I have no idea what bills are going through.
No.
Do you have any idea?
Well, you hear about it occasionally if it's reported that a certain thing was controversial. There are certain questions
Yeah.
raised by certain MLAs about a certain bill. We also have the tendency in this country and in this province is adopting it too, of these omnibus bills where you clump a whole bunch of particular bills into one bill and it's then put through. So a whole bunch of things, specific items, are captured by that one bill, which makes it even more difficult for the MLA to express opinion or to have input into what's coming before it.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say I really don't know if the legislature is sitting these days, and I have no idea of what bills are going through.
No.
And isn't that a sad state for our democracy?
Yeah. We have a system whereby you can find out what's going on if you make it your business, but not many of us do. We just hope that the thing will work out to the best of our interests, and the only thing that we're given, most of us, is an opportunity to voice opinion at every 4 years at election time.
For 1 minute.
For 1 minute, when you come and make an X, and that's about it. But and parties will try and get your money and your active engagement in terms of electing the candidate that's been selected.
So how do you pick? Let's say you're going to do a constituency assembly. I live in Victoria Beacon Hill. My MLA is Carol James. So let's just use my
Let's do.
constituency as an
Well,
example.
I would say we'd have to make a great effort to invite you, plus your neighbors, plus everybody living in this general Victoria Beacon Hill, to come to one place for a meeting. And it might be at First Met United Church, or say, or at Oak Bay, well, at a school, at the high school. On a Saturday. The House isn't sitting then, so we know that the MLA isn't busy on that day. But we're meeting that day, and then we spend the whole morning and some of the afternoon in considering what is coming down. And we can get copy of that, Jack. We can find out what are the bills that are coming before through the House leaders and through the systems that are in place at the legislature. We can find out all the bills that are going to come before the House at that session.
But these are all very complex issues with ramifications that, you know, on first glance, you may think yes, but somebody tells you some facts and you think no. So people have to have an understanding and a background, you know, to get beyond the superficialities and have some idea of what they're actually...
Well, it will take, as you say, a lot of work, but I can still think that you can take, and I'll give an example, Bill 53. I don't know what Bill 53 is, but let's say it's about senior citizens' health and residential care. And you could get a team of 3 or 4 people, nonpartisan people, to sit around a table with that bill in front of them, and they could probably come up with an executive summary as to what is, in fact, is in that bill. That summary, a 1 or 2 pager, could then be handed out to the folks that meet from that constituency and saying, this is what is coming before the House on Bill 56.
Okay, now one thing about citizens' assemblies, which I'm a little bit familiar with, although we don't very often have them in our country, is that they have to be randomly picked. Because what you don't want is a group of activists coming who have different points of view and saying, this is what we think. Usually these assemblies are randomly picked, so you try to get essentially a random group of ordinary citizens to see what ordinary citizens think. Is that what you would like to see? Or?
I have heard about that. The word I have heard used is wisdom councils.
It's another name
for citizen councils. And they use a scientific reputable firms to make selections, and they simply go over the telephone book for that particular
and various other things as well.
Various means of making a selection, and that's randomly done, and the people that are then approached. There's not very many they're chosen to make this system work. So you're dealing with under 20, 25, something like that, people from Victoria Beacon Hill, or from Oak Bay, Gordon Head, or Victoria Swan Lake. I mean, it's randomly selected. It's not according to constituents. But they can come together and they can make take a real effort at considering what are the important issues and coming up with statements about that.
Well,
However, it lacks what I call clout in that so a citizens or a citizens assembly says such and such about these particular bills. Who cares? Because it can be then put to the premier, or it can be put to the MLAs and saying, this is what the citizen assemblies, this assembly is saying about these bills. Well, as far as the MLA is concerned, they say, well, who was that and where did they come from? And you know, they're not from my area, so I don't need to pay attention to them. They're just another lobby group, you know, or another group that could act as a lobby. And I'm listening to this, the Chamber of Commerce lobby group. I'm listening to this labor group, whatever it is. And they're more important for me to listen to than to listen to you. But if you get it coming from a general area that the person is supposedly representing, then at their peril, at greater peril, they ignore it. because it can get back at them in terms of the election and in terms of.
Well, let's take, for example, the idea of the entire liquid natural gas
Yes.
thing that the Liberals are pushing, and the NDP is pushing it too.
Yeah.
LNG. Now, I'm totally opposed to the whole thing. Wouldn't it be useful to know what, in general, the people
Yeah.
of BC think about that? And yet, do we have any idea?
Yeah.
So let's take my constituency again, which is Victoria Beacon Hill. What is the feeling of the people in Victoria Beacon Hill towards
Yeah.
the whole LNG thing?
Yeah.
And how is Carol James voting on that issue? Because the party supports it.
Yeah.
So she must support it.
Yeah.
Does the voting public in Victoria Beacon Hill support it? If not, then she should not be supporting it. But we don't even know.
No, we don't.
And I think that's
Well,
one of the important things.
that would be
you're right.
valuable. That would be valuable, I'm sure, on specific issues, and you could maybe highlight an issue like that, or two or three of them like that are in the estimation of the leaders of it, or the organizers of it, are currently the most important. They're in the top of the hit parade, as it were, in terms of what people are likely concerned about. And so you could hold a Victoria Beacon Hill constituency meeting and make it open and invite people to come, and then
Shouldn't
James,
Carol James be doing that to find out
Well,
what
except,
her voters think?
I'm trying to do something that's citizen
Yeah.
motivated, citizen initiated. Sure, she could do that, but in order to do that, she would have to not do something else. And I just think that to simply expect MLAs to be developing that kind of an organization, I don't think it's realistic. I don't think they can. And the bigger the constituency, of course, it even becomes more onerous to try and get the word out and get it. If it were legislated that you have to have these kinds of citizens assemblies for each of the constituencies between sittings of the House or whatever, if that were a law of the province, then it would be feasible.
What do you think about that as a law?
Well, I don't think it would be passed.
No, but just as an idea.
Well,
that
as an idea, but I think it has to be proven as having some kind of value.
Well, I mean, the value is
For the
you're
public.
bringing together randomly selected groups of people to find out what the general public thinks. In a democracy, what could be more valuable? And
Yeah.
why aren't we doing it?
Well,
You should be hired immediately by the
realistic
province.
in my, at least I think I'm realistic. I hope I'm not cynical, but I'm realistic to know that in the current milieu, in the current climate, political climate, the powers that be would engineer that, so they would get their people there. I mean, it would be in their vested interest to make sure they, in terms of LNG, liquefied gas. I mean, the whole industry would amount to, they would put in a lot of money and time to make sure that their people were there. They would do that, and it would just be another form of lobbying that would need to be somehow.
Yeah, but I'm talking about doing it right, so that really within my constituency, Victoria Beacon Hill, you actually picked a randomly selected group of people,
Yeah.
and you found out what the people
Yeah, I just
think.
don't see any value in picking anybody. You see, if you had a general, my thinking of people generally in the Victoria Beacon Hill or any place else, and that's my constituency too, is that if they had an opportunity to actually express opinion to one another, but finally to their MLA, I think a lot of people would take advantage of that.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think a lot of
I'm
people
fine with
would.
that too. Yeah.
And they would probably really test it out very seriously to see whether, in fact, it works. Just the chance to speak about issues to their MLA might be motivation enough for them to come. the idea of working that out with neighbors or with the people in that general community would also have an attractive feature. And if that expression was paid attention to, so that Carol in this case would have to pay attention to that as much as she would have to pay attention to whoever's leader or the caucus or the whip.
Then we'd be somewhere.
It would be, I mean, she would be kind of conflicted with that. And as
Dale, I'm afraid we're out of time.
Okay.
Believe it or not. Thank you very much. I think it's a very important idea. I hope we hear more about it.
yeah, I would like to move more with you on that. Yeah.
Thanks for watching Citizens Forum. Hello and welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Wednesday, March the 19th. I'd like to thank again our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. Our guest in this segment is Tristan Trotter, and we're going to be talking about a development, I guess a proposed development that's happening very close to where I live, which is how I know about it. And Tristan, maybe you can tell us where it is, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, the proposed development is at the corner of Pandora and Vancouver, and it extends north to Mason Street and east to Franklin Green Park. So it covers almost, well, about a third to a half of that block.
Okay, so most people know where Pandora and Vancouver streets are. Right now there's
St. Andrew's School, a Catholic school.
the school is now closed.
That's right.
There's a big playground, and really it's like an open space, which is very, very nice. People need open spaces.
Yeah.
And that's going to be gone.
That's right. The Catholic Church has had the site for probably well over 100 years. And in its last years, the elementary school was basically a private school. So people were coming from all over, dropping their kids off, and it handled elementary school grades. But at the end of the school year, last year, the school stopped, and it's been sitting empty since then, waiting for this development proposal to go through the city machinery. We first heard in 2012 that the church wanted to sell the site. They wanted to consolidate a couple of their schools in a new facility, and that would be located elsewhere. And we had heard that they wanted $10 million for the school site. When we first heard about the proposal, we assumed that it would be a condo development, maybe 12 stories of residential on the corner of Pandora and Vancouver. So the neighborhood held a visioning meeting to sort of see what would be acceptable to the community. And the people who attended the meeting were a wide cross-section. Some people wanted nothing to happen to the site or have a community garden there. There were a couple of people who would have accepted a 12-story high-rise. The consensus was that we wanted to break the tower down to a couple of smaller scale developments with a walkway through the site, and no higher than about 6 stories at Pandora and Vancouver, but scaling down to detached townhouses or row housing on Mason Street, which is a quiet one-way street.
So we've got Pandora here and Mason here.
That's right.
And here's Vancouver.
That's right.
And what you wanted was something higher on Pandora.
That's
but
right.
coming down to 1 or 2 stories on Mason Street.
Well, coming down to 2 or 3 stories on Mason Street, but real townhouses or some kind of row housing that would fit into the neighborhood and be much smaller scale. Right now, there's single-family homes on the other side of Mason Street,
And a farm.
as well as the Mason Street City Farm, and there's a commercial building that we operate our shop in, which has residential rental units in it, and then there's more rental down the street, but facing Balmoral.
Yeah. So right now it's a very quiet, Mason is a very quiet residential street.
That's right. That's right. You know, sometimes we might get you know, 6 to a dozen cars in an hour going down the street. So we held our visioning meeting, and then BOSA came up with a proposal to develop the site.
Okay, and BOSA is BOSA Properties.
BOSA Properties from Vancouver, operating under the name Blue Skies for this development.
Blue skies.
And so they presented a proposal to the neighborhood in the fall of 2012. First to the North Park Neighborhood Association, and later to a group of neighbors within 100 meters or so of the site. The development plan was for a 6-story development that would cover the entire site. There'd be an interior courtyard for residents that would be on top of the 2nd floor, and there would be a huge grocery store as an anchor tenant, 30,000 square feet, which
Now,
is more than double the size of the Market on Yates.
Okay, the Market on Yates is a small supermarket, so when you're saying double that size, you're talking about a very big supermarket
Right.
as part of this
Development proposal. Yeah.
Okay.
So we had a number of issues with it. The most significant issues were that there wasn't a transition from Pandora to the character of lower scale buildings and heritage type buildings on Mason Street and to the north.
Yeah, and once again, we're talking about proposal being planned for the corner of Pandora and Vancouver, coming down to Mason Street, which is 1 block further south.
Further north.
Further
yeah.
north. And which a lot of people feel is definitely out of character for that particular neighborhood.
That's right.
So now BOSA is coming forward with a 6-story building covering basically the whole block and a giant supermarket
Right.
in it as well.
And another key element was to bring all the traffic in and out of Mason Street.
A street
They-
which now gets, you said 6 to 12 cars an hour sometimes.
That's right.
So now it would be up to many, many hundreds of cars.
They estimated at peak hour, it would be a car per minute. So that's 60 cars in an hour. The issues.
Doesn't sound like a lot for a big supermarket.
Well,
1 car a minute sounds low.
the overall total of new trips generated by the site would be 300 per hour. So they may estimate that it would be 60 per hour from Cook along Mason Street, but there's nothing to prevent more traffic from coming from Cook into the site. They would give up the equivalent of a lane of traffic on the northwest corner of the site to allow for another lane as a west to east lane to go into the site. So we had problems with the scale of the development, the fact that it covered the whole site, the huge grocery store, bringing all the traffic in on Mason Street. Those were some of the essential problems as we saw in the development.
Now, I mean, this is an issue that crops up over and over again throughout cities. People often don't want change in their neighborhoods, and I completely understand that. On the other hand, if there wasn't any change, this would still be a forest, and none of us would be here, I guess. So, I mean,
Where do you get the balance?
Where do you get the balance?
And I think the balance to be struck, the official community plan is quite contradictory in terms of wanting higher density and at the same time talking about neighborhood character and a core area of the city that would be walkable and bikeable. So it's a matter of trade-offs. And you mentioned the grocery store. Is it appropriate to have a large commercial operation in the center of the city that likely would have to generate a lot of car traffic as a destination shopping site. Now, whether it's a grocery store or some other kind of big box store, it doesn't matter. They're talking about a grocery store.
Supermarket.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there already are Wellburns, which is at the end of that block, on the east end of the block, and has been operating for 100 years in one form or the other. There's the market on Yates. There's the new farmers market in the Hudson. Do we need a large grocery store in that mix?
And there's a Fairway not that far away on Quadra.
That's right.
Yeah.
And even though the city anticipates a lot of growth in terms of population over the next 20 or 30 years, we need to plan for that growth, but we also have to take into consideration the interests of the people who are living here now, and have a more gentle, sensitive transition to the scale of housing that exists and could exist for a good time to come. Because in order to produce new development, someone has to want to sell a property before it can be redeveloped. And then you should be taking into consideration the scale of the surrounding buildings and the character of the streetscape. Quite often it's not necessarily a particular heritage building on a street that people want to retain. It's the general feel of the street. What gives the city character.
I live close to there. I walk by there a lot. It's a neighborhood without a lot of parks, without a lot of green space. It's basically all streets. That little open space is important to
It's a bit of an oasis.
Yeah, it's a bit of an oasis that makes you feel that you're not in Vancouver. So once again, tell us what would be acceptable to at least the group of people that you represent, and to the neighbors.
Well, I think based on conversations at the North Park Neighborhood Association and with other neighbors, we definitely wanted something lower scale on Mason Street.
Okay.
We wanted all of the traffic coming in on Pandora.
Okay, so all of the traffic coming on Pandora, which makes sense. I mean, otherwise Mason is changed irrevocably, and it goes deeper into the neighborhood.
It basically would turn Mason Street into a service lane for a huge commercial operation. The least of our worries are the 200 units or so of housing that would be on site, because a lot of those people no doubt would be walking into the downtown core. But the amount of traffic generated by the commercial operation is another issue.
So do you want the supermarket just canceled?
We wanted the site broken up so as to prevent a 30,000 square foot store.
Okay.
And to do that, one way you could do that would be to have a mid-block walkway that would cut diagonally through the site from Franklin Green Park to the corner of Pandora and Vancouver.
So let's go on now to our city councilors, and because they are the ones who are going to make a decision at some point in the future.
Yeah. So where it stands now is that BOSA has come back with revised plans which show 4 stories on Franklin Green Park and on Mason Street, but that's attached to a larger mass which has increased to 7 stories on Pandora. BOSA has not given up any of the residential number of residential units. They haven't given away any of the commercial space to do that.
Still a 30,000 square foot.
It's still 30,000 for that one store, plus additional commercial space.
Massive change for the neighborhood.
It is, and the traffic still coming in and out of Mason Street. So what would happen next is the revised plans go through the city staff. That's where it is at the moment. And once it's gone through the planning and engineering traffic engineering departments, it'll come back to city council, and the city will have to decide whether to put it before a public hearing. And if it goes before a public hearing, then members of the public can speak to the proposal. whether they approve it or not, and City Council will have to vote. Now, we toured virtually all the members of City Council, including the mayor, over the site and voiced our concerns. They all understand the issues, and they've been to Mason Street and seen the way the street is now. Quite often we were talking in the middle of Mason Street and occasionally stepping onto the sidewalk as a wheelchair or a cyclist or a car went down the street. It's that quiet. And standing on the south side of Mason Street, the shadows we were casting were almost to the other side. And you know, now we get the latest shade studies from BOSA, which show winter shade all the way to Balmoral Road.
Yeah. So where do our councillors stand, as far as you know?
Well,
we've only got a minute left, so.
Well, the proposal, the original proposal, went to the Land Use Committee when that was 3 City Council members in May last year. And that was Pamela Madoff, Lisa Helps, and Marion Alto. So those 3 councillors heard us and basically asked BOSA to reconsider their plans with some of these key issues in mind. So the Land Use Committee has effectively been disbanded. It is now the whole of City Council that is considered the Land Use Committee. But all of those City Council members have heard our concerns. Where they stand individually is difficult to say. I would say that you know, Shelley Gudgeon represents the voice of the North Park Neighborhood Association, which is still opposed to the development.
And Tristan, I'm afraid we're out of time, sorry. Otherwise we're going to be running out, so
sorry.
Thank you very much, and thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum, an important issue right here in our city. Just keep your eye on it. Thanks very much.